Okay. Yeah, you already briefly mentioned it. You grew up with tabletop role-playing Dungeons and Dragons. How did that all start for you? How did you first came in contact with it?
Actually, I didn't get my start with Dungeons and Dragons because at the time when I was a kid, we're talking in the I don't know early to mid 1980s. The Satanic Panic was just getting underway. I
Yeah.
grew up in I'm talking a small southern town of about 2,000 people, maybe a little more. And I'll put it this way, we had maybe like one or two stoplights in the town I grew up in. And
Oh,
uh, due to the hysteria in the media, Dungeons and Dragons was off limits to me. Like, you couldn't get it. There were no bookstores in town you could get it. In fact, if you wanted to get your hands on it, you had to go 45 minutes out of town to a place called Lake Charles. And you could get it there, but the trick was number one, getting it, and number two, hiding it. So if you're with your parents, they're always looking at what you're buying. If you're buying it, especially if you're buying it with your own money, that was just kind of
yeah.
out of the question. But I actually got started one year when my mom got me Hero Quest, the board game, which is which is essentially this without this. And what that means is it has its own rules. You do have like one person who sets up the entire thing, and then the players take on like pre-made characters, and they have these little miniatures that they move around the board. Dice are rolled, to determine attacks, defenses, and um, it's basically one big dungeon crawl without the role playing aspect involved.
Yeah.
And later on, another friend of mine who lived in Lake Charles, who would come down every so often, came along with a book called GURPS, which was written by Steve Jackson. It's Generic Universal Role Playing System. And at first,
Okay.
we had a hard time really navigating it, but once we started understanding it a little better, because this book got passed around like a lot. Once we understood it, we just took the Hero Quest game I had and the game he had, we combined them, and we made our own version of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was still basically, the dungeon crawl was like the later part of the game. The meeting in towns and that sort of thing was the first part of the game. So when we got into Intro to Dungeons and Dragons or First Quest, that was where we really, we were walking into familiar territory by the time we were like, and we opened
Yeah.
that box and we found the little hero miniatures were the exact same miniatures that were in my Hero Quest game. And I was like, okay, I still have some unbroken, um, like villain pieces we could still use. So then we combined those two things and just, had a blast. We had a great time. That's really how I got introduced into it. But you had to be careful who you invited to the table, because if you invited the wrong person, that person would just they'd blab it all over town. Next thing you know, the rumors got
Uh,
out of control.
yeah.
That's how I
Especially in
learned the
the
hard way.
yeah, especially in the smaller towns, word gets around
Oh yeah.
so
Oh yeah.
fast, and especially during the Satanic Panic. Like I haven't lived through that age, fortunately enough. I'm a '90s kid, but I can imagine from a more religious perspective how games like Dungeons and Dragons could be seen as bad or evil or whatever. Although they, if anything, they just promote creativity and storytelling. And I mean, I don't see how that could be a bad thing, but hey, that's just me. That's why I'm a Greyhorn Pagan, not a Christian or a Catholic or whatever.
Right. And I
Um,
think where the real trouble began though was, and I'm going to admit this, I'm a huge dumbass. And I say that because I especially if I know someone's lying about something, I don't allow them to lie, especially if I'm
okay.
present. So if
Yeah.
I know something they don't, I'm going to say it. And it was my, I mean, for years there was this fear campaign, and I'm going to tell you, at first I was scared to death of that game. I was like looking at it like I'd look at a horror movie, just
Yeah.
just staring at it. And I'm like, how can anyone crack open one of these books? And then when we started making our own, and then of course, our friend Nick comes over, dude, look what I got, bang, lays it on the table. I'm like, ooh. And by that time we're already listening to metal, so I'm like, okay, well, they were obviously
Right.
lying to me about metal. Let's see what's going on here. And we played over the summer, the entire summer we played. And when I get back to catechism class, they started it on that, and I went, that's total garbage. And my catechism teacher just stops, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, that's a lie. That is, I've been playing it for 3 months, and you have been lying to us the whole time. And now it's
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to let someone back me out or anything like that. It turned kind of ugly that night, especially when she looked at me. She goes, never again. And I went, I'm playing this Saturday. She's like, no, you're not. I was like, I'd like to see you stop me. And now it's more accusations. It's more you're completely full of shit. And
Yeah.
word spread through that high school like wildfire. And I was like, how the fuck does this happen? You're going to church with a devil worshiper? Are you fucking serious? And yeah, it just escalated from there because I wouldn't back down. And, just kind of cutting through the long and short of it, through all the verbal and physical abuse I suffered, well, I got to tell you, the whole thing was designed to get me to stop. And guess what? I won. I'm still playing. So
Yeah, man.
there's no victims, whether they're physical scars or mental scars or whatever. There's no victim on the other end of this. I won. So